Welcome on behalf of the Scott Hosier World War II Roundtable. This is our November program, and if you've never been to one of our programs before, we hope that you find tonight educational and inspirational and maybe even a little bit entertaining. And if you have been here before, we thank you for your continued support and interest.
It's my pleasure to introduce Francis Wheelock, our first speaker. Francis, when did you come to work at the Mayo Clinic?
March of 1938.
And you retired when?
In February of 1984.
And were you born in Minnesota?
I was, St. Peter.
Oh, I didn't want you to say that.
Well,
after you were born in St. Peter, did your family move to Missouri?
Right.
And how did you return from Missouri to Minnesota? What was the mode of transportation?
2 white horses and a covered wagon.
A covered wagon.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you were riding on this covered wagon?
5.
5 years old. And so I would suspect you would go a certain distance each day, and then where would you stay at night?
We'd stop usually at some farm just to pull off the road, and we'd have build a fire and cook supper and stuff like that. Once in a while, a farmer would invite you in for supper. So I know that's what you're wanting to get at.
Well, I think I would like... You'd think we talked about this already, wouldn't you? I would like to know if a farmer came down to the fire to get acquainted with your dad and happened to admire this strong, strapling 5-year-old.
Well, actually, I don't recall of anybody coming down. This farmer invited us in for dinner, and supper we called it, but and when we were sitting there, that was my stepdad that brought us up, and the farmer's looking around, you know, and I was sitting at the table and eating, and he looked over and he said, I'll give you a quarter for that little one over there. And believe me, I was darn scared because I knew my dad didn't have a dime in his pocket. I figured I was gone, but he didn't sell me. So I came to Minnesota. I think it took us 10 days to get here.
10 days?
Yeah.
I want to fast forward to being in Rochester at about the age of 15, and you still don't have hardly a nickel in your pocket, and you had various part-time jobs to help support your family, and you had a chance to observe a drill by the National Guard.
Right.
Can you share what happened?
Well, 3 of us were downtown walking around, just something to do. We didn't have a dime in our pocket, or we could have gone to the Empress Theater for 15 cents. But one kid said, hey, this is Wednesday night. Let's go down and watch the guards drill. So we went down and watched them drill, and pretty soon one of the guys said, let's go down and join up. I said, hell, we can't join up. We're not old enough. Oh, he won't know the difference. So we went down and went in, and Captain Ralph Graham was sitting there, and we said, we want to join up. How old are you? We all said, 18. And he picked out some papers out of his desk and showed us, just sign right here. So we signed. Well, my mother wasn't too happy when I came home and told her that I joined the National Guard. But she didn't say too much. But one kid, his mother really raised Cain. She went down to Grand, and she really raked him over the coals. And he said, lady, he said, "Do you know where your son was Wednesday night?" And she says, "No." Well, he says, "From now on," he says, "at least you'll know where he's at every Wednesday night." But that didn't satisfy her. So he said, "But if you want him out," he says, "I'll give him a discharge." But he said, "You ought to think about it. You didn't know where he was." And so she let him stay in. So that was it. We went in the Guard.
So the National Guard gave you how much for doing that once a week in camp in the summertime?
We got $1 a week for, a private got $1 a week, and of course we were privates. And it was paid every 3 months, which was $12 every 3 months. And you know, that $12 came in pretty handy because an insurance man talked me into a 20-year pay life insurance policy. And I'm just going to tell us a little bit. And if I hadn't had that insurance policy, I wouldn't have had that farm out of northeast of Rochester, because I borrowed on that insurance policy for the first acre I bought. So that's all on that.
All right, I want to fast forward. You're getting some money on the work that you did with the National Guard once a week.
Yeah.
I have the impression that you worked at the Mayo Clinic and you emptied waste paper baskets and maybe cleaned the floor, but somehow you get into X-ray.
Well, yeah, I had to beg for a job there. One day I was going through the park and I saw one of my friends, and he was coming. He had a nice suit on, and Mayo, he said clinic across his chest. And I said, "Bob, how did you get in the clinic?" He says, "Go up and see Harry Bennett," he said, "at General Service." So I went up there, and he asked him for a job, and he says, "No," he says, "not a damn thing in sight. Come back in about a month." So I went, and I came back in about a month, and same thing, and come back in another month, and same thing. No, not a damn thing in sight. Well, that was March. And I usually just took off and left, but that day I just stood there, and finally he said, you really want to work? And I said, "Mr. Bennett," I said, "why do you think I've been bothering you?" I said, "I gotta work." So he said, "Get that overcoat off. I'll want to see whether you want to work or not." And he worked my tail off. And any time a call would come in, no matter how many others were there, I got it. And so he kind of liked me because I worked pretty hard. And one day he asked me, he said, "Would you like to better yourself?" And I said, "If there's a possibility, I would." And he says, "I don't know what they have you do. You may have to work in the dark room or whatever," but he said, X-ray department is short of help, and they need somebody up there. That was in the summertime. So he took me up there, and right away the head technician took me in, and well, he got me a white coat, and took me in and showed me how to shoot a chest, and he said, "Well, now you put the patient up for the next picture." And somebody called him out. Well, I got this woman up there, and I couldn't just leave her stand there, so I went ahead and measured her and went in and shot her and let her go. And pretty soon he'd come in and he says, "Where's that lady?" And I said, "Well," I said, I couldn't leave her stand there. I said, "I took her picture and let her go. Don't take any more, don't take any more." So he took off and went down to the dark room, and when he saw the film, well, "Okay, do everything just like you were doing."
So that's how you got into the X-ray.
That's the way I got into X-ray.
Okay, we got to get caught up on our pictures here. I don't know what, this is when you were in the National Guard, and that's you right there. Is that correct? You're the third one. You've got a picture right in front of you, Francis.
Oh.
You got a picture right here. You don't have to be all bent
that's
over.
it.
But the
That's
third, the audience doesn't, but that's you right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's see what the next picture is. The next picture is that Dr. Chuck Mayo?
Yeah, that's him.
And how did you happen to talk with Dr. Chuck Mayo?
Well, of course, I knew Chuck Mayo before, but he came in one day and wanted a chest X-ray. So I took him, and he says, "Make her good." He said, "I'm going in the service." Well, I thought he was quite a bit older than me. Why was he going into the service? I said, "Why are you going?" Well, he says, "I'm opening up the Mayo unit." And I said, "How about going with you as your X-ray?" And he said, "Well, I got to go up to Fort Snelling for a couple of weeks." And he said, "I'll check into it. When I get back," he says, "I'll let you know." So a couple of weeks later, his secretary came in and says, "Dr. Mayo wants to see you." So I went in. He said, he said, "I can sign you up." And I said, "Good." And he said, "What's your marital status?" And I said, "Well, I'm married." And he said, "Do you have any children?" And I said, "No." "Well," I said, there is one on the way." And he said, "When is your wife?" This was in the spring, probably March or April, or something like that. And
42?
1942?
1942?
It would be 1942.
Okay.
So he said, "When is your wife due?" And I said, I said, "She's not due until December." And he said, he said, if we were going right now, he said, "I'd take you. But I'd have no idea when we're going to go." And he said, "If we stick around here until she's about ready to deliver, and we have to up and go, and you didn't have to go because I had a pretty high number in the draft." And he said, "She'd never forgive you." And he said, "If it was me," he said, "I could step on a plane no matter where I'm at and be back here." But he said, "Francie, you can't do that." He said, "Don't do it." He said, "Just wait for the draft." Well, I said, "I know somebody else that wants to go," so I told him, and that guy did go. So in December, I went out to see my wife. She had the baby, and hey, I got a nice girl. And anyway, I went out to see her, and when I was coming out of my room, her room, and walking down the hall, I kind of looked up, and I saw this colonel come walking down the hallway. And I said, "Dr. Mayo, what the devil are you doing here?" And he said, "My wife's in the next room to yours." He knew when I said December, he knew he'd be getting a call, and he'd be stepping on a plane. And I'd get a call or a letter or something, and I would have to stay there. And Chuck Mayo was the kind of guy that did not want that to happen. So
Isn't that a neat story?
I never did get to go with Mayo, but I managed to get there otherwise.
Okay, so you are in X-ray, but as you see yourself here aiming an anti-aircraft machine gun, I'm a little confused about how the X-ray becomes part of your military career.
Well, I actually was in that before I was in X-ray. We were, the National Guard that I joined, Company C, was an infantry company. And back in about 1939, the Army streamlined the Army. They were streamlining the Army. And so our company was changed from an infantry company to an anti-aircraft. And I was a squad leader, and the squad leader is the gunner in the anti-aircraft. So when I went up to be inducted in at Fort Snelling, they went down the list and they see, oh, I was an X-ray tech. So just what we need. And then they went on down and they see I was a gunner in the anti-aircraft. Oh, machine gun. Oh, infantry. So I ended up in for Rainbow Division out in Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. That's how that come in. It was just because I had been in a company, you know, was an anti-aircraft gunner, probably in 39 or something like that, 39 or 40.
All right, but we want to know how you go from being an aircraft gunner to taking advantage of the training that you had in X-ray, which
Well,
you're ultimately going to be as your service.
It was very
Job.
difficult. I was sent out for basic training at camp, in an infantry, 42nd Rainbow Division, and so I put in for a transfer to an evac hospital, and my captain even recommended that because they needed X-ray technicians, and but a two-star general told him that he didn't like it very well that he recommended me, because he said nobody in the Rainbow Division, if they're physically fit for overseas duty, can get a transfer. And so I was physically fit, so I just forgot about it. And one day I was out, it was on a Saturday morning, and I was out in the field, and a Jeep came out and said, they want you back in the office right away. So I got in, I took back there, and they took me back to the office, and they said, there's a Major Downing over at the camp hospital who wants to see you. Well, I didn't know who Major Downing was, but anyhow, we were through for the weekend at noon on Saturday, so I just got my Class A uniforms on and went over there, and I figured on going into town for the weekend. And I went over and went in, and this big staff sergeant was sitting there, and I said, told him that Major Downing wants to see me. And of course, I'm a private. He said, just have a seat. So I sat down, and it was getting pretty close to 12 o'clock when I really would be on my own. And I thought, well, I'll give him 5 minutes, because he just sat down and didn't do anything. So I watched the clock, and when that clock hit 5 minutes, I got up and I said, Sergeant, you either get off what you're sitting on, and tell him I'm here, or I said, I'm walking out. I said, he asked to see me. I didn't ask to see him. So he went down, and I heard him go in and said, there's a Private Wheelock to see you. And he said, oh, good, send him right down. So he come back, and I went down, rapped on the door. He said, "Come in." Of course, the first thing you do is you salute the officer sitting there. And I got my hand up about this far, and I recognized him, and I dropped my hand. I never did salute him, by the way. And I just said, "Well, I'll be damned." And his secretary is sitting there, and she said, "Boy, some people sure got a lot of pull." And he turned to her and he says, "You think you could find something else to do?" Well, she went and found something else to do. And because what he wanted to talk about, he didn't want anybody else to know anyway. So he said, by the way, the reason I knew him, he was a doctor, and the Army sent him to the Mayo Clinic to learn to be a radiologist. I happened to train him. So, so that's how I got, anyway, he wanted me, and I said, he said, I want you to run the x-ray department. And I said, "Well, what about that big tech sergeant out there?" And he said, "If you'll take the job," he says, "you'll get the stripes, and he'll be long gone." And and I said, "Major, you can't get me." And I said, "I've already tried to get a transfer." And I said, "Nobody transfers out of the Rainbow if they're physically fit for overseas duty." And I said, "I'm physically fit." "Do you ever have headaches?" And I laughed. and I said, "Hell, everybody has headaches." And so he said, "If you'll take another physical," he said, "the neurosurgeon's a good friend of mine." He said, "We can fix it." And I said, "Major, you got put out a pretty good deal." I said, "I left an 8-month-old baby when I came in here." And I said, it'd probably be nice to have my family out here and sitting around." I said, "But I might as well stay at the Mayo Clinic." I turned down a deferment from the Mayo Clinic to go in the service. And I didn't go in the service to sit in the United States x-raying guys that got a little cold or something like that. I wanted to be over yonder where the guys were getting blown up. That's what I went in the service for. And so I said no. I said, "I won't take it." And so I left.
So let me understand. You could have stayed in Oklahoma. Your family could have moved to Oklahoma. You'd have had a good job. Your family's together.
Yep.
But what's going to happen is you want to go abroad, and eventually that's what's going to happen. We're going to have to fast forward here,
Okay.
but you are going to be able to go abroad.
Right.
And you gave up then the security of staying at home because you wanted to serve
Okay.
overseas.
All right, and then I went home on furlough, and I just went up to the clinic to see the guys, and one of them said, "Say, Kirk's in his office. Why don't you go ahead and see him?" So I went in, and of course, he was sitting there in his uniform, and I give him a salute, and he said, "Did Major Downing talk to you?" And then I realized how Major Downing knew I was there. And he said, I said, "Yes." He said, "But," I said, "you know me better than that." I said, "I wouldn't take that kind of a deal where actually it was illegal." And so he looked, he said, "When are you due back?" And I told him, and he looked out the window for a minute, and he said, "I wouldn't be surprised if there's a transfer on the desk when you get back." And I said, "Colonel, those birds look nice on your shoulder," but I said, "that guy out there's got 2 stars on his. He outranks you." And he said, "I still wouldn't be surprised." Well, when I got back out there, it was there.
It was there.
And I was transferred to an evac hospital. and that's how I got to,
All right, let's look at the map.
it's,
And essentially, when you're in Europe, you're going to start, I got a railing in the way here. I don't know if people could see it, but I think you start around Metz.
well, I came in Marseille, and
Okay, Marseille would be in the bottom down here
Yeah.
on the Mediterranean.
And we went up through France, and I remember going through, I think it was Metz, but anyway, we went to Alsace-Lorraine, and there was a battle there, Alsace-Lorraine.
All right, but
And
you're going to go
Saarburg-
from Marseille,
Saarburg.
you're going to go from Marseille to Metz, you're going to go into Germany, and then after the war's over, you're going to be at Reims. Isn't that going to be
Right, yeah.
basically what we do?
Right.
All right, I want to fast forward, Francis, to when you're at Dachau.
Yeah. Dachau?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Well, that was the end, that was where the war finally ended up, for me anyway. We went into Dachau. I was still in the evac hospital. We went in there to, we had to take care of there's a lot of prisoners, 32,000 prisoners there. And when the Americans come in, there was 50 dog runs there, and they were all had one dog in each. There was 50 dogs there, and they were all killer dogs, and trained to kill on demand. And so Patton gave the order that they were all to be shot. Well, one night when I was walking around, after the American Army took over, they were finding SS troops. This was SS headquarters, by the way, and the dogs were all shot, and except one, and I always figured he was probably escaped. But when I got talking to you, I started thinking, because that was 70-some years ago, and that dog could never have escaped, because he had to be taken out by some SS guy that was hiding in this warehouse where I was walking down the street, and I saw the door open about this far, and it kind of brought me to stop and look, because we were catching SS troopers sneaking out at night, and probably 4 or 5 every night they would catch. And I saw something move, and it was in the grass, and that caused me to stop, and I stared at it, but I thought it was too small to be a man, so I finally slowly walked over, and here I saw this dog laying there, and he couldn't walk, he couldn't get up. I helped him up, and so I took him back to my X-ray department. I put him in the dark room, and went and give him a pan of water, and I went over to the mess hall and stole a loaf of bread and brought it back and gave it to him. And the next morning when I come, boy, he was just as happy as a lark. And I saved that dog's life, and I'll tell you, he would never touch me. He's right by my leg all the time. And we went every place. He wouldn't bother anybody. And so, but he bothered the wrong guy. My colonel came around for an inspection tour, and if I had known that he was there, I had him tied outside, and if I had known it, I know definitely that I could have controlled him, and he would not have bothered the colonel. But he wouldn't let the colonel come in, and the next day my dog was gone.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, Francis, I cannot imagine transportation in a covered wagon. I cannot imagine not having a nickel in my pocket. And I so admire what you have gone through from the beginning of your life until actually where you are today. And I want to thank you for sharing your stories, and I want to thank you for serving our country.
Thank you, Tom.